Hello, friends. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you are here. This is the astrology report for equinox to solstice. We are looking at the basic themes of the astrology from the equinox that happened on September 22nd all the way up through the solstice in December. I believe it will be exact on the 21st of December this year. 2021. So welcome back, those of you who are subscribers and regular viewers to this channel. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. And if you're new to this channel, you're new to astrology, welcome. It's so great to have you here. And whenever you interact with content like this from independent content creators like myself, it actually does support the channel being suggested to a larger and wider audience. So thank you for anything you can do to help in that way. So a point that I want to make before we get into the astrology is to point out that the elite of the world use astrology, okay? Billionaires use astrology. And what do they use it for? They use it to plan their events. They use it to harness the energy of these geometric configurations that carry a resonance, right? Sacred geometry in the sky. They use it to plan their events. They use it to coordinate their rituals. They use it to figure out the best time to activate certain plans, projects, and anything else that they are attempting to bring into form, okay? So it's important to understand that this tool, whether or not you want to use it, you have to understand it. Because the people who are responsible for dominating this planet use this modality and they use this tool very actively. So you have to think about, and we get now how they control both sides of the conversation. So one side has convinced a very large cross-section of people through religion that astrology in and of itself is evil. What a great way to get people to not understand the very potent tool that they use as part of their dominating structure. The other part of it is getting people to worship and to take it out of the context of their reverence for the natural world and putting infinite creator and source as the primary focus and taking the choice point out of your hand by making it seem like that you are just a victim to the astrology, or that it is the astrological transits and configurations that are kind of controlling your life, or certainly that they are the primary focus. So there is, and also there's the conversation that it's bunk and it doesn't do anything that comes out of the scientific community. What another way, what a brilliant way to, here, look over here. Don't see the fact that I'm harnessing this tool while at the same time, pushing the narrative out through the scientific community that there's no basis to it. I mean, it's quite brilliant, honestly. So whether or not you're going to use astrology to also plot your own projects, your own events, your own connection to the planet, whatever it is, understanding it is really, really important. And understanding what these archetypes represent and how they fit together and why sacred geometry is so important and why geometric configurations have a resonance. Why else would they be using it for ritual purposes? Well, it's important to understand this. It's important to understand it, right? Now, some people can understand it to the point where they can use the weapons against them, right? And to counteract potentially what may be put into effect with the alignment to certain astrological configurations. And as we're going to see, we're coming into another eclipse season, and this is a big one, right? Because not only is it going to give us kind of a preview of what happens when the lunar axis, the nodal axis of the lunar nodes, the nodal axis of the moon, my Lord, when it moves into Taurus and Scorpio, which it will in early 2022 in January, right? It's going to move into a new polarity. This eclipse season especially the full moon lunar eclipse that's going to be happening in November, is going to give us a really strong insight into what that's going to be like for the time period that the nodes are in Taurus and Scorpio. It's also connected to a political figure's chart very directly, and it's important to see how they utilize these cycles as a way to harness very natural energy in order to activate their particular things. And so we're going to go over that too. But I feel very strongly that it's important that even if you're not going to use it, to understand it and to understand what it all means gives you an advantage just by understanding how those who seek to control every facet of your life are also using this tool, right? And so it's an infiltration in some ways into their most time-honored tools and modalities. It's the same thing with the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. Any kind of mystical or esoteric practice, even if you don't practice it, to understand it means you understand them, right? The mystery schools, the secret societies, and to turn away from these and in fear and a sense that it's quote unquote evil, you are not giving yourself the opportunity to understand those who use it for those purposes. So with that being said, let's get into it, and I'm going to show you what is unfolding. Number one, everything that you see here on the outside, this is Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, asteroid Chiron, Uranus. All of these are large transpersonal planets. What does that mean? That means that they have long, their orbits are longer than Mercury, Mars, and Venus, for instance, right? They're more personal planets. They move more quickly in their orbit. It is something that those archetypes represent, something that we are personally able to relate to, and we can relate back to our own individual experience. They have a lot to do with the archetypes at the bottom of the chart. And so if you've been following me for a while, or especially if you've had a reading from me, then you understand the bottom of the chart is the individual growth process. And when you get to the top of the chart here, it's all about your relationship to others. And these larger transpersonal planets tend to be the rulers of the signs that are on the top of the chart. So they also happen to be in cohorts and large spans of time, and they have to do with larger groups of people and generations. And so right now they're all retrograde. By the end of this time, by the time we get to the solstice, every planet and object, all the way except Uranus, Chiron, Neptune, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, all of them will be in their prograde or direct motion. They will be out of their retrograde. So all of this time, these large personal planets, transpersonal planets that have to do with larger cycles of time, larger groups of people, larger constructs and institutions, transcendental experiences, the higher mind, the larger context, all of these aspects are going to be moving forward, starting with Pluto stationing direct on the day of the new moon, which is October 6th. Okay, and so we'll go through the timeline over the next 3 months to show you when it's going to happen and the general themes, because as you see here, the Sun and Mercury, which is now retrograde, Mars, and even Venus, they're all going to be traveling essentially together, which means they're going to all be making the same basic connections to everything over here, right? Even with Uranus, they're all going to be allowing different parts of our psyche and our archetypal experience that they represent. Mercury representing the mind, Venus representing our sensitivity to the world of value and the physical material world. Mars representing our action and our ambition and the warrior energy, right? The Sun representing our illuminated self in terms of our passion and our creative self-expression and who we are on the outside. All of these related to us individually and our individual experience are going to be making connections to all of these planets at different times. And so there's going to be a lot of themes. And since they move so slowly out here, even when they start moving direct, they're going to be still in the same basic degree. And so there are symbols attached to all of these degrees. So there's going to be a lot of themes that we're going to go through over the next couple of months, leading up to the solstice that we're going to go through. But it's important to realize that everything with these larger planets that represent larger institutions and transcendental constructs and, like I said, cohorts and generations and long spans of time, they've all been retrograde. So they've all been kind of in review or on hold or internalized in some ways, where we're experiencing what they stand for, but in more of a microcosm within ourselves. They're all going to start moving direct, which means all systems go. October is something that I have been talking about since the spring equinox, and I know other astrologers, I'm sure, have been talking about it for much longer, because this is the flashpoint, right? What happens in October into November, especially October, is really going to be we're coming out of the simulation now. It's going to start turning on, right? The engines are going to start turning on and moving forward. And our ability to hold our center internally and to find peace and joy in our own self and to find that stasis and that calm within ourselves is really going to be put to the test during this time, okay? And there are plenty of opportunities that will allow for us to really harness this energy just as much as anybody else, but for the sake of not giving into fear, standing in our own power, right? And standing together, because the reality is that now that the Sun and Mars and Mercury and Venus are in Libra and Scorpio, it's all about the social relationship now. We have moved through much of, if not all of at this point, the time frame that is about our own individual work, right? And of course, the moon is the moon. And so we will get plenty of opportunities on an individual and subconscious level to reconnect with all of those archetypes that have to do with the individual experience. And of course, the north node of the moon and even black moon Lilith, as you see here, right? That the dark feminine, right? That part of ourselves that's so deep that we don't even realize it's activated. There's a self-preservation that's there. And of course, Chiron in Aries, right? Just really wreaking havoc constantly, right? Just constantly poking at that wound of self. But everything else is really in the areas about how we relate to other and our relationship to other and the relationship to polarity in general. So it's really going to start being the test. You know, we've had a lot of time to review. And with Mercury stationing retrograde today, there'll be plenty of more. There's still time. There's still time to go over our notes. There's still time to turn the lens within in our mind and really look at what it means to be an adept when it comes to this seamless balancing of a scale that requires us to apply everything we've learned about ourselves and apply it to the social context, because that's all that really is going to matter at this point. Uranus obviously is in Taurus, not going anywhere for a while, and so there'll be plenty of opportunity along the way for Uranus to shake up and radically shift our material reality in order to awaken at a collective level, and it'll make connections to all of this stuff up here. But it's really now about how we go forward together and what that means, okay? So all systems go now, right? All of these planets, like I said, are going to move direct. They'll all be direct except for Uranus by the time we get to the solstice, except for Venus. Venus will make her way to 27 degrees Capricorn right before the solstice and will station retrograde. And for those of you who have been following or know astrology, you know that that is the natal Pluto of the United States. And that is going to be a very significant moment when she stations retrograde there, because we will have this very palpable moment in the value systems that we have, right? Reaching that point of the real power of transformation that Pluto represents. And so when Pluto crosses this point several times in 2022, because it'll cross over it going direct, and then it'll go retrograde and then come back again over. So we in the United States specifically are going to experience a lot of upheaval in terms of the very institutions that make up the foundation of this country. And so when the solstice comes and Venus hits this point and stations retrograde, there is a moment where we just kind of like our value system and our sensitivity to what is valuable, what is beautiful and harmonious, what we attract to us that we desire, right? An object of our desire. That is how Venus functions. It's going to meet this point, and we're really going to feel it in our actual bodies, in our relationships, in our material reality, and our own value system. Okay, so by the time we get to the solstice, there is going to be this sense here of what this all means for us. And then, of course, we'll be in a whole new season at that point. So now we're looking at the chart for Friday, October 1st. So I figured this is a great place to start because I've already done the weekly that's leading up to this point. And this is really where it gets interesting. So as you see here, I mean, look at the geometric configuration already. So I'm going to point some things out to you. Number one, you see that there's a rectangle. I want to make sure you can see this. A rectangle, right here. So here's Saturn, here's the sun and Mars, here's the moon, here's Chiron, and then you see this cross in the middle. This is called a grand cross. And these are two oppositions that provide tension and tension. And you release the tension with a grand cross through the blue lines of this rectangle, mystic rectangle. Actually, it's not a grand cross, but it kind of is too, because you see the opposition here with the nodal axis that is really highlighted by Black Moon Lilith being on top of the nodal axis of the moon. So there is a lot here, and not to mention the fact you see this triangle, which is a grand trine, right? It is an air trine with Saturn in Aquarius, the sun and Mars here in Libra, coming to a point at the bottom here with the North Node and Black Moon Lilith. This is all happening on Friday, right? And so this is a strong anchor, this grand trine, right? A trine is an angle that is very secure, it's very harmonious, and it requires nothing from us, right? It's just like when you have the triangle, its three angles support the structure itself because they are equal angles, 120, 120, 120, making the 360. So when you look at the alchemical principle of squaring the circle, for instance, you find that the outside of that, so the circle and then the square is the material around it. The circle is our infinite selves, our soul. The square is the material around it, which is, us in a material form. And what you find is the perfection of the Trinity, right? That is the pinnacle here. Now, we have to be really careful about the amount of what we give to these symbols, these numerological constructs, okay? Because we don't want to inadvertently be supporting a symbolism, a set of symbols that is really reinforcing a system that is actually keeping us, enslaved and asleep. So it's about understanding it rather than giving it our vital energy, okay? But what I will say, just in a mathematical construct here, I mean, the grand trine is very, very secure. All three angles support itself in this structure. And so when we have the North Node, which is down here, of the moon, and what is the North Node? It is that point where the moon orbiting around the Earth crosses the ecliptic plane, right? And in astrology, especially evolutionary astrology, I mean, this is the karmic trajectory of the soul, right? The North Node being where we're headed, the South Node being where we've been and what we are releasing. So the North Node is where we're going, and we have now moved away from the Hyades starseed connection. And I've talked about this in today's transmission. So you can go back and listen to that if you want to understand what that really means. Now, Black Moon Lilith, this is this sign right here, is the point of the void between the moon and its apogee. I think I got that right that time. The point in the orbit around the Earth, right? The moon is orbiting around the Earth and it's in an ellipse, right? And so there's a point in that ellipse where it's furthest away from the planet. All bodies are orbiting in this way. It's not a perfect circle. It's an ellipse. And so when it's further out, there is a space in between the moon and there's a space in between that point of apogee and the Earth itself. The midpoint there, that blank space, that is Black Moon Lilith. It is deeper than even our own subconscious. It is our connection to the dark sacred feminine. It's got a lot of Kali energy. Of course, Lilith has all of these connections in various religious contexts and various spiritual contexts. But really, from an archetypal standpoint, it is that deep part of ourselves that wants to survive and is connected directly to something deeper than even our own subconscious. And self-preservation is a very strong drive. And when we are aware of that and we are conscious of that and we accept what that is and are not letting it take over, then it's in a powerful, powerful place and something we can really draw a lot of our own power from. But when we are unconscious of it, when we don't realize how it can self-preservation can turn into, acting in a destructive way, this is where it works against us, right? And so when Lilith in this position meeting the North Node there, and the North Node is the head of the dragon, right? There can be an obsession. There can be like an any means necessary getting to this point with the North Node. And to have Lilith here, this is a very powerful combination, but it's in this part of this Earth trine where we have Mars and the Sun in Libra, right? Who are both supposed to be very weak in Libra, but I am finding right now that they are actually not weak at all, but they are finding their strength in the balance. It's pretty remarkable how right now that doesn't seem to be the case. And I think too, because Saturn in Aquarius is also part of this trine. And so we find like a very strong mental foundation and an anchor. I mean, you can really see in the imagery the way that it's all kind of drawing down into this place of this is where we're going, and by hook or by crook, we are going to get there. And in fact, it is the power that is so deep that we don't even realize it's part of us is also really, really drawing this down, right, of where we're going as a collective on a soul level. And this is really about traditional, I mean, the more we get closer to Taurus, right, because these nodes move in a retrograde naturally, the closer we get to Taurus, the end of Taurus, the closer we get to the Pleiadian nature. And the Pleiadian nature is very, very simply is about learning to connect directly to the natural law, the natural energy of the planet, of the cosmos, of each other. And the Pleiadians, as starseeds, their role is really to hold the resonance of polarity in its natural state, in its natural form, right? To be able to seamlessly move from masculine to feminine, from light to dark, from above and below into an open and balanced heart chakra, okay? That is the Pleiadian aspect. And when I talk about the Pleiadian revival, it's because when these nodes shift, our soul's trajectory, our soul's karma, where we're like being pulled towards and we're going to get there no matter what, is in the direction of the Pleiadians and the Pleiades star cluster. And we are evolving by aligning with ourselves with the natural energy of the planet, of the cosmos, and with each other, right? Natural law, not natural laws, law, natural law. But it is not the mechanism. That's Capricorn of the natural law. Is in Taurus and with the Pleiades, it is a natural resonance, right? It is just being connected to the planet and being one with each other and the planet and God. That is really what the Pleiadian revival is going to bring about for us, right? So you see this anchor with this grand trine. Now you also see that there's an opposition here with Chiron. And the reason I'm spending a lot of time right here on Friday the 1st is because a lot of these themes are being like shown right now in this chart that are going to unfold over the course of the next few months, because it's going to be the Sun and Mars in opposition to Chiron. Mercury is going to come back and be opposed to Chiron when it gets to the end of its retrograde. So these themes are going to come back up. Okay. It's just that there are different aspects of how we express ourselves or understand ourselves that are meeting these points and making these connections. So in an opposition to Chiron in Aries, right, there is really strong propensity right now for us to really find some sort of centralizing factor in our consciousness and our subjective experience. Really, it's almost like we're desperate for it at this point, because it's really easy to get caught up in Aries by whatever emotionally inflames us, right? It's very instinctual still in Aries. It's very fiery, obviously, cardinal fire. And it's very new and fresh because Aries is the seed point. All of the potential for our growth exists in this one singular point. And so all of the potency and desire of who we could be exists in this finite form of the seed, right? And so we're starting to feel. Well, and with Chiron especially, it's a wounding, it's a shame and a guilt about this, right? We each are starting to really see a need on some level to really centralize our own individual subjective consciousness into something that is going to protect us and to allow us to survive, which is our ego, right? There's nothing wrong with the ego in and of itself. It is our survival part of our psyche, and it is the beginning of life, right? Is the sense that you are, in fact, a central point of I am, just like the seed is able to, if the seed was conscious, would be like, I am this seed. That is what Aries represents. So when we start talking about Chiron, of course, we're talking about wounding, shame, guilt that's imposed upon us, an identity of being a victim, right? And so there is a strange and very palpable and very intense wounding about this, of who we are, of just being ourselves, right? That is getting inflamed with Chiron over and over and over. And now we're really starting to feel this guilt about wanting to stand in our own power, right? Stand in our own subjective experience of who we are. And the opposition with the Sun and Mars, especially at this point, is because these two figures, one being sustainment, illumination, the expression of who we are, and Mars are masculine, both of them wanting to be over in Aries, are in fact pulling away from that point and drawing our attention and our action and our expression of ourselves and even our bravery and courage into a much more balanced position and drawing our attention towards being more balanced in some sort of social context, that it's not just all about us. The thing is that Chiron will trigger this victim savior narrative for us if we don't realize what it is. And in the feeling of shame and guilt for just wanting to actualize ourselves, we will feel guilty about it on some level and want to help other people do that, but not do it for ourselves, because otherwise we would have to give up the identity of somehow being a victim, right? And I'm not suggesting that there isn't victimization. There definitely is victimization, and we have to be real about that. But realize too how easily that gets manipulated when we can't take ourselves out of this identity. in some ways, this opposition here, as much as there's a tension, is allowing for us to utilize the relationship we have in a social context or a relational context, and our focus there to find a way to heal this wound in some ways, right? It's a tension, right? We find the fulcrum. So we don't want to get totally set over here, but we don't want to forget about ourselves when we are putting all of this energy on justice and fairness. We have to allow room for both. And the opposition is where we find the balance point between these. This is where we get the most out of it, is the fulcrum, right? And you can see how there's a fulcrum, how there's a balance point between this opposition between Saturn and a Leo moon, my Lord. And then we have this nodal axis with Lilith as well. Like, there is a midpoint here that is really important to harness. Now, we can find that through this trine, number one. And number two, we can also find it through the trine and the sextile as well. These are trines, right? This is an air trine. And this is a sextile between Mars and the Sun and a Leo moon, right? And so we see that there are ways to balance this out by allowing for our own emotional state, our own subconscious, our own intuition to step into a sovereign nature. That is what Leo represents. And when we do that, we don't deny this part of ourselves. And in fact, it's kind of like a rebirth in some ways that allows us to heal this. And then also too, Saturn, this is the degree Saturn's going to station direct, right? Much later, and I'll show you where. So this is also important because there's just so much going on just in this chart alone that is showing us that finding this midpoint here and drawing it down towards the direction that we are really we're so almost, we have almost no choice consciously, right? We're being so driven to get to this point. And there's a new version of us that's about to be born, and it's going to come through when Saturn actually stations retrograde, and not us individually, but a new version of humanity that is about to be born. And when Saturn stations direct, the shell of the egg will crack. And in the meantime, we do want to find a balance here with that warrior nature and the sun, right? The expression of who we are towards justice and balance and fairness, right? We want to be focused on the relationship in and of itself so that we don't get lost in it just being us, okay? So, because where we're going, like I said, is very much about connecting into the natural world. And if we are not balanced within ourselves, when this is happening, then it's very easy to start feeling disempowered and to lose ourselves, okay? So there's a lot happening just on Friday the 1st, but it's going to reverberate out through so much of the rest of these next couple of months. So what is going to happen? Well, let's move over to this chart so that we can start moving forward, because I want to start showing you exactly, what we're going to be talking about. So on the same day, we go here, the same day as we see here, Mercury still in conjunction with Arcturus, and I talked about that a lot today in the transmission. So again, go back and listen to the transmission so you can, if you haven't already, so you can get an idea of what this is all about. Squaring Pluto. Again, this is going to happen another time later in November, and so our adeptness, our ability to use the realm of the mind and our intellectual capacity and knowledge of self, knowledge of the world, just knowledge in general, and what we've learned about ourselves and how to balance things in relationship to the very raw and the very powerful transformative power of Pluto is really going to challenge us again, right? But this time this just happened, and now it's going to be retrograde. So again, the lens is turned in really this time, because now both aspects of Pluto and Mercury are both retrograde. So this is going to be a time for us to really go in really go in and really assess and really turn that lens on ourselves and review. Do we have the capacity to utilize our mind and our thoughts and our choices in the knowledge that we have about ourselves to balance the scales in the face of, and in some ways with the friction of, the very real experience of destruction that leads to transformation on a institutional level, because that's what Pluto and Capricorn really represents. So as we move through October, right, our first real, we're going to have Venus is going to move into Sagittarius. But before that, here's our new moon, right? Here's our new moon, and it's going to be with Mars, right? It's going to be with Mars. They're all conjunct with each other, as you're going to see here in a second. Yep, they're all going to be at 14 degrees Libra at the time of the new moon. We're also going to find that right after this is when Pluto stations direct. So right then and there, we know that this new moon, right, this is where we set intention of growth from within, with the courage and the bravery of Mars. As much as Mars is at its detriment in Libra, meaning it's not very powerful, it can really put that energy towards the balance point that this new moon is representing. So we have the whole lunar cycle in October to find that rest point at the center of who we are, so that everything is chaotic around us, we know that what we're cultivating and growing over these next weeks in October is going to be that inner stillness and peace. And we can even use Mars as to give us the bravery to be able to hold that while things are going on around us and outside of us. Because what's that going to look like? Well, when Pluto now moves direct, like I said, all systems go here, right? The Pluto, the agent of death and transformation, metamorphosis, it has to happen, destruction, emptiness, change, right? All happening simultaneously. And so now that Pluto stations direct, it's going to start happening outside of us. It's going to start being manifested outside of us. So we're going to want the bravery of Mars to hold that space within us as we go through the course of this month, because it's not just Pluto. It's going to be Pluto. It's going to be Saturn. We're going to see it's going to be Jupiter, all moving direct over here. Okay. So we also see that, Venus has moved into Sagittarius, okay? So she has really taken a lot to be in Scorpio. She's not happy in Scorpio. She's at her least powerful in Scorpio, because Venus is about the object of her desire. She's about being comfortable and safe and secure. It's about what she values, right? And when you go into Scorpio, you have to actually sink to the depths. You have to really get into your subconscious, into your darkness. You have to see your own shadow. And that is a hard place for somebody, for an archetypal figure like Venus that just wants to be happy, secure, and safe and beautiful, and really just pull to her what she wants to be comfortable. There's no comfortability in Scorpio, because you have to see the truth in Scorpio. There's no way around it. So by the time she gets to Sagittarius, whatever she saw down there is now going to be the power of alchemical transformation. So again, it's going to come through what we value, who we value when she comes into Sagittarius. So this time in Scorpio that she's been in is going to make it's going to have an impact on what actually is going to be created and the understanding that Sagittarius represents, because it's the big picture here. It is alchemical transmutation. It is understanding that Sagittarius represents. And when we have understanding, we also want to defend those collective values. And so, again, our values and value, big deal with not only Sagittarius, but also with Venus. And so she's going to act on what is valuable and understanding really from a larger perspective what is valuable, but it's going to come directly from her experience in Scorpio. So what have you really come to be sensitive to in terms of your own shadow, in the shadow in general, the power of symbols, ritual, the power dynamics in relationships for whatever type of relationship, because it doesn't matter the relationship itself. It's about being awake to what it means and what we're capable of creating in communion. And if we're unconscious of it, but still participating through our subconscious, it's still just as powerful. So we've learned a lot, and we've seen a lot, and we've felt a lot with Venus and Scorpio. And so when she gets into Sagittarius, she's going to take all of that and she's going to use that for her alchemy. So there's certainly going to be a lot of optimism. There's certainly going to be a lot of big picture and expansiveness in our values, and defending, certainly wanting to attract to her what fulfills that collective paradigm and belief system. So that's something to be mindful of, what we experienced with Venus in Scorpio. So with that new moon, I can't overstate enough how important it is to find the bravery and to really embody that bravery and that courage to find that still point within you, because the tendency and the temptation is to be pulled off balance constantly by what Pluto is going to start doing, which is like just destroying everything. For a long time, it's been pulling the threads out from within us. Now it's going to be in our actual reality. The thread of the matrix that we identify as our reality is going to start unraveling, and we're going to need that point. Okay, we're really going to need it. So that's the new moon, right? Venus enters Sagittarius, and then we see that Mars and the sun are conjunct, and since Mercury is in its retrograde, that means that it's now going to be in a conjunction with the sun, so in its cazimi. And again, these are very similar things. How are we going to reconstruct ourselves while transfiguring ourselves? How do we find that still point at the center of the scales in the midst of the actual dynamic process that is always happening of balance? It's never static. And you can see they're all together again. So we had the moon here that was with the sun and Mars. Now it's with Mercury. So again, we're going to find this review period that Mercury's already been past this point. And so it's going back. And it's like, how do we acknowledge what is happening? How do we see that we have been in that, but now that we pull ourselves out of it in some ways, just enough to be that still point in that process? This is important. Now, Venus at the very same time is going to meet K2, right? You see that she's in opposition to Rahu, or the north node. K2 is the south node. It's where we've been. It's the tail of the dragon. It's what's being released. Oh boy. And the moon will be here as well. So the moon and Venus meeting the south node. This is the ritualization of the conflict. This is so important to realize how sensitive we're going to be to the chessboard, right? And how it is ritualized. And this is a moment here where this could very well be utilized to activate something on that chessboard. And you don't want to get pulled into it. This is what this is all about, is to not get pulled into it, because it's going to be very sensitive. It's going to be embedded in our subconscious. We're going to feel it. We're going to know it. It's going to be part of our value system, and it's going to be what we have to leave behind. The ritualization of the conflict, because we are trying to take ourselves out of that conflict, because where we're headed is much more in alignment with the natural law, not in the conflict and the friction that conflict actually allows for. The friction between polarity is what allows the alchemical transmutation of creation, right? To create something new. And it's not that is a bad thing in and of itself. It's where we've already been. It's the past, okay? So keep that in mind too when this is on the 9th of October. So let's see here. And then the 10th is when Saturn stations direct and the egg cracks. Okay, the egg cracks. You can see here how and we have a yod, right? A finger of God between the moon and Mercury and Uranus. So these two quincunxes pointing to Uranus, really challenging us to find that that innocence almost, right? To be able to be connected connected to the natural world and playful, right? That loving elementals that was part of today's reading. This is where Uranus will move into. And so it's certainly going to be disrupting our ability to really find that, that connection to something so much deeper and more natural, right? And it'll come from the disruption of that. And so we find ourselves, again, this point in Sagittarius in a sextile to this point in Libra, right? We invest this energy in each other, and it allows us to transmute, this quincunx, right? These are both opportunities to adjust ourselves in the face of Uranus doing what Uranus does, which is radically shake up and reorient reality so that we can wake up out of it, right? When we turn reality on its side, it allows us a new perspective, and it allows us to wake up out of the bondage of the material world, right? Which is the Aquarian nature. And it's not so much that we reject the material world or feel that we are bound to it in a negative way. It's just that you realize at that point that there is more than just the material world, and that there is an energy of love that moves through the connection of humans and life in general. And when you're able to connect to that, then that is really the power that holds it all together. It's going to be in the disruption of the material world, though, through Uranus, that we find that awakening. And so it's this ability to reconstruct the ties between our conscious mind and the unconscious, and connecting to a much older something that has already gone past, right? There's something in our past here that we'll be able to connect to very, very much in our dream state, or very much intuitively, that will allow us to reconnect, repair that connection in some ways, so that we can utilize that in order to connect to the natural world. When we connect to the natural world at this point, it will allow for the realization or the direct connection to the love that holds life together, because that's really the highest version of Aquarius. And Uranus rules Aquarius. So let me see here. So the 10th, like I said, is when Saturn stations direct, and this is where the egg is going to hatch. The egg is going to hatch, and a new mutation of reality is going to start coming out, right? And it really is going to depend on where you've been with all of this so far in terms of what actually emerges from that egg. And the sun and let's see here, the sun and Mars, they're both going to start making connections to Jupiter in Aquarius, who's also going to station direct soon. And Venus is going to be in a trine to Chiron in Sagittarius. So let's move forward here. So I don't want to inundate with you with too much energy. And there'll be plenty of opportunities to go over all of this in the weeklies, in the dailies. I mean, but knowing what's coming over the next couple of months is really going to be important, so that you know why this is such a flashpoint, because this is where we're really going to get tested. So the sun was in a trine to Jupiter, and coming into connection to Spica and trine Jupiter, and our ability to really be disciplined, right? To take what we have learned about what it means to be connected through love and use that and be disciplined in that, not to let it be overthrown, or not to let it be challenged or manipulated, but to really be disciplined in that connection, and be disciplined in the use of that connection, right? And training. There's this training that's been going on with Jupiter retrograde. And when it goes direct, it'll definitely be like, okay, let's take that training and let's put it to use. And so this trine with the sun conjunct Spica, right? There's a beautiful opportunity there that is about nourishment and sustainment and giving and being of service that Spica really represents. And so there's something to be said for the ability to hold that balance in service to others. That allows that discipline, right? That's really where you want it to go. And we express ourselves through the sun, and through that we find an expansion within us of that love principle that allows us to really hold the line in a lot of ways, right? We don't want it to be misused in any way or turn into like some sort of collective hive mind. That's the other thing too. We want to be actually using that energy as a way to find sustainment and nourishment and be able to be of service to others. Spica really speaks to that. And Spica star seeds are just beautiful in that way. They are always holding that which is able to sustain and nourish other people. They're very, very of service. And so, of course, Mars is going to come around and have that relationship as well right after it in mid-October. Now, this is where it's going to get interesting again, because now we're coming into the full moon territory. Number one, 18th is when Mercury stations retrograde, when Jupiter stations direct. This is the 18th. Pay attention. The 18th, Mercury stations direct, Jupiter stations direct. Mars, like I said, is in a trine to Jupiter now that it's direct, okay? And so this discipline is now being supported by the bravery and the courage that Mars represents, that divine masculine, saying like, yes, now I can utilize that fire within me, that ambition and that drive that Mars represents, and have really good balance and be supported by Jupiter. That's now like, okay, it's time to expand outward this discipline of this love principle that holds everything together. You have to use it wisely, use it in a way that is trained and not let it be misused. And Mars, as long as Mars in that way is able to really focus its outward ambitious warrior energy on being a sacred warrior, being a warrior of the spirit, it will absolutely support our ability to be very, very very trained and disciplined with that energy as it goes outwards. This is important because when we get to the 20th at the full moon, number one, the moon is in conjunction with Andromeda Galaxy. These star seeds are on the front lines of social revolution. Freedom, 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 and independence is the calling card of the Andromedan star seeds. So the full moon will be in conjunction with Andromeda, okay? Andromeda Galaxy specifically. This full moon is when we come together and realize that we're all here to support each other. This is going to be a moment where we really we really come together and voice our very strong pushback against the dominator and controlling establishment, okay? This full moon is a big deal. And they're going to do everything they can to try to hijack this, okay? But now we know. And we also know that Mercury is now direct. So that energy of our knowledge and our mind and our ability to use our nervous system in order to really bring everything that we have learned and apply it into teaching and transmitting to other people. Jupiter will be direct. Saturn will be direct. Pluto will be direct. We have Venus that'll be in a quincunx to Uranus, so that's going to be kind of a, it's certainly going to be an opportunity to adjust ourselves in that moment. And of course, we see that Mars is going to also be in a square right after this with Pluto as well. And so this in conjunction with Arcturus. So the warrior part of of Arcturus and what that represents is going to come out of the woodwork too. This is going to be when things really, really culminate, is at the full moon on the 20th, okay? And everything is leading up to this point. And it's so important that we can keep our center, that we can be disciplined, that we cannot be shook, so that when we get to this point, we can come together as one voice and really assert our independence as a collective to those who would benefit by keeping us, contained and in slavery, basically. So once we hit the 20th of the full moon, and Mars is in a square to Pluto, right? So that friction between Arcturus and the warrior nature of Arcturus, the masculine part of the balance, in square to Pluto now, that is just full steam ahead, destroying things. Again, we're gonna it's going to, this push is not going to come without its challenge. Okay. So that's something to consider as well. Right after this is when Mars comes in, or the sun comes into Scorpio. Okay. So now we're in Scorpio season, and we're really going to start, I would say, expressing ourselves, illuminating ourselves, finding our passion, finding who we are through the power of our relationships. It was one thing in terms of using our knowledge of self to find a perfect form of balance. Now we're going to start actually feeling into what that means. Now, there's some really cool aspects that are coming down the pipeline as we move into Scorpio, because what we see here, and Venus already did this. So what we're going to see here is, well, first of all, Venus is going to, as we come into the last full week of October, Venus is going to square Neptune, as we see here. And so there's a sense of really anticipating where we're going, and what we are creating through our transmutational power. In terms of our collective values, right, is going to find tension with trusting from a very innocent and tactile position what's to come. And this is going to be very difficult, I think, very difficult, because we are really being challenged to just trust, to really trust at the highest level, at the most transcendent level, which is going to be hard with Venus, who is keeping us tethered to reality in a material way and our values, who is going to want to, in some ways, act out the anticipated creation based on our collective values as a society, right? This is different than what Pisces is. This is the big picture in terms of society's collective values. Pisces is everything and nothing. It is the infinite source, and we are being challenged at this point to really trust it, and to trust it in a very tactile, feeling-based way with some, sense of hope, and not necessarily hopium, but just hope. But it'll be challenged by our propensity to want to secure and comfort ourselves by acting in a way that we anticipate is going to happen, if that makes sense. There will be such a strong, when we get to this full moon, it'll be really strong, and it's going to be important that we hold on to certain aspects and we let go of other things, so that we don't get pulled into something that really doesn't actually align with where we want to go, but is being put forward as the most comfortable way to start to act, if that makes sense. There's yeah. Let's see here. What always got as we come into Halloween. Mars is going to enter Scorpio. The sun is going to square Saturn. Now we're going to start having all these squares to Saturn in early Scorpio. The sun and Mars, but Mars in particular is going to enter Scorpio on the 30th. Let's see. Here we go. Mars enters Scorpio, is definitely the co-ruler of Scorpio, so it's getting its power back now, but it's going to be much more of the drive and obsession and the hunger, right, to find unification, to find the deepest and it's a yearning with Mars, right? The yearning to, and it's very sexual, right? There's a lot of really potent sexual energy with Mars and Scorpio. Really is driven to find that point of connection and power in the polarity that exists in Scorpio. But then you have the sun, which is in a square to Saturn, right? That is, again, we are, boy, our ability to hold, again, it comes back around. Can we hold our emotions and our feelings like a calm lake and get a clear reflection back to us in the face of Saturn now that is presenting to us these archetypal forms of where we're supposed to be going? And we have to be very mindful of what that looks like, because they're not real. They're just wax figures. And it's important to have something to look forward to, but also at the same time, we can really find ourselves by quieting our mind and finding inspiration in our darker subconscious level. And with Mars here, it's going to really push us to go into that place as well. So that's going to be very interesting. Mercury's still in Libra at this point, and as we get into Halloween, we're going to find here, let's see, we're going to find that Venus is getting to the galactic center very quickly here, and the moon is going to be in a trine. Here's our first Virgo in a while, since Virgo season, right? The moon in Virgo is going to be in a trine to Uranus, and this is getting into Syrian starseed territory. This is sextile Sirius, so it's Syrian starseed territory with this 12 degrees Virgo in a trine. There's some heavy baggage here that we are going to have to let go of in order to make it through this Stargate of Uranus, and it's important to realize that. And a part of that is the ability to really be able to create something through that rather than to hold on to the density, if that makes sense. You don't want to necessarily hold on to the density. You want to use it as a creative potential, which is what the Syrians really are able to do. And there's going to, this ability to realize our very purpose of being here is within each of us personally, is going to be very connected to the baggage that we ultimately have to let go of. And so it's really going to help, right, to let go of the baggage in order to really harness in the full potential of why we're here. There's not much Virgo anymore because nothing is in Virgo now. And so this is just a moment here with the moon in Virgo to go back and remember who we are, who we really are, and why we're here. And this trine on Halloween is really going to assist in that process. So as we move into November, this is when eclipse season is going to start coming around the corner. So Mercury is now back into a trine with Jupiter and with Spica and Arcturus, just like where it is now, except both of them will be direct. So again, this is where we apply that adept ability to balance, to find fairness with in our minds and our thoughts, and really utilize that to be disciplined, right? To be disciplined in the harnessing of the energy of the collective, right? We don't want to misuse that. And Jupiter does support and expand and advocate and give us like resources. So as long as we understand that the resources will go towards our ability to utilize the love and the energy of the collective in a responsible and very disciplined way. I mean, our minds are going to be able to help in that process as they reach Spica and Arcturus, which are very, very masterful energies in terms of the balance of the universe. There's so much potential here, but there is a lot of challenge, and there are so many things as each of these planets start ticking back into their prograde or their direct motion. It's going to another cog is going to start turning, and the end, you know what I mean? It's going to start, the whole machine is going to start moving. And that's really where we're going to be tested, and we're going to see how well we can actually utilize our relationship with each other in a way that actually takes us where we want to go, instead of having it be harnessed for somebody else's agenda. It's going to be really, really difficult, but worth it. Mercury exits its retrograde shadow. It's going to meet Pluto again in a square. So again, both of these are going to be direct at this point. And then we come to our new moon on the 4th, a new moon in Scorpio, right? And our ability to put together seemingly unrelated facts is going to be the flavor of this new moon, right? Our ability to be like an inventor in our lab, right? To start making new connections that we've never made before, to put together things, right? This is the benefit of the rabbit hole in some ways, right? If we can go into the rabbit hole as a means to put together the pieces of the puzzle, to connect dots that we haven't connected before, this is going to be the essence of this new moon. This is the intention that we set for the new moon in the Scorpio new moon. Now, it will be in opposition to Uranus, as you can see. So heavy baggage. We're going to have to let some things go. There's going to be a lot that we're going to have to let go in November, right? And it's going to be within us, right? Because Uranus is retrograde. So it's going back over areas that we've had to let go of, and we're going to let go of more. We're going to let go of more, but in the tension between these two things, we're going to be able to connect more dots than we ever have, because we're going to let go of the baggage of social ambition. Ooh, that's a good one, isn't it? We're going to let go of the baggage of social ambition in order to really connect dots that we've never connected before. And I really have a lot of hope that people that have been hanging on to the accumulation of goods, the accumulation of notoriety, the ambition they have to be relevant, I really hope that they take this for what it is and let go of that, so they can actually see what's going on. They can actually be part of the solution. They can actually start putting together pieces of the puzzle that they've never been able to put together before. This is the way to harness this opposition at the new moon on the 4th of November. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. Venus is going to enter Capricorn, and then the 5th of November, here it goes. Venus enters Capricorn, 0 degrees Capricorn, the very zenith, right? This is where Venus is like, okay, it's time for me to start taking a leadership position in the world that I am part of, right? She starts to become an authority. She starts to take some responsibility for her value and what she values, right? What's valuable to her. She's not just pulling it towards her as a result of her natural magnetic attraction, but she is now realizing that she is part of a much bigger picture, and she needs to step into her responsibility in this time. 5th of November, this is the same day where Mercury comes into Scorpio. And remember, Hermes was the only one that could go into the underworld. And that is exactly what's happening now as the moon exits Scorpio, actually. So we subconsciously went through this Scorpio realm over because of the new moon, and now Mercury is allowing us to actually go back into the lab in some ways, to really be able to go into those spaces without drowning in them, right? To use our minds. So we set the intention with the new moon, but then our minds are able to go into the space. And of course, we have our warrior energy of Mars that is totally no fear, right? Going into these spaces, not afraid to go into the darkness, into our shadow, to really look at what's down there and not turn away. And Mercury is going to be like, now I can go in and actually do my work at the lab, right? I can actually start accumulating the knowledge in this space to really put the dots together. The new moon just allowed us to set the intention for that to grow within us. And it was the baggage we had to let go of with Uranus in Taurus that will really stimulate that awakening if we choose to see it that way. And Venus steps into her role as an authority in this matrix, and she accepts the responsibility of her role in this place and pulls to her not just what she wants, but what's best for the situation as a whole, right? There's a really, Venus in Capricorn and Venus in the 10th house really is an individual that is able to pull towards them many facets in order to create something bigger than herself. It's a really, and for it to be the 5th of November, this is important. This is an important day for so many reasons, obviously. And after this, on the 10th, we're going to see that Mercury and Mars come together, and they're also going to be in a square to Saturn with the moon right here. Wow. At the same time. And so, again, this was that moment where Saturn and the sun were in a square the week prior, right? Can we keep our, can we go into the space of the depth of feeling and keep the surface of our emotions calm so we get a clear reflection and be inspired? And it's keep the disturbances of this realm at a minimum. And so Mercury and Mars come together and are able, if they can support each other in this process, even in the face of the moon, having us connect to where Saturn is, right? Which is the wax figures, the exemplars of where we're supposed to be going. Our subconscious awareness is going to be really connected to this and wanting to find some sort of structure and form in these type of figures. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with these figures. They're just figures, though. It's just scaffolding. We want to be inspired in our mind and in our action by having a calm moment here and keep our emotions still and calm so we get an accurate reflection. This is going to be very difficult here with this square to Saturn and the moon, because our feelings are going to be very much structured and controlled by this particular set of images of where we should be going. And these are the examples that we want to work towards, bringing into form and crystallizing. So it'll give us a chance to really take into account what that actually means, and if we can in fact keep our disturbances at a minimum so we can find inspiration in our action and in our mind at that point. So let's see here. Mercury is going to come and oppose Uranus, just like the new moon did, of course. And now the moon is going to, and at the same time, the moon is going to be in a conjunction with Neptune, right? We're looking at here we go, the 13th of November. And this is where we get some really good dreams, right, of what it means to really trust the plan, and not trust the plan that the PSYOP gave us, like really trust like the infinite source plan, God's plan, the transcendent plan. Are we going and feeling it, right? The moon meeting Neptune is going to allow us to connect to it so directly, so intimately, so much in our feeling that it'll be one and the same with us, which will be really, really cool. And at the same time, this is when Mars is in opposition to Chiron, right? Are we going to be, or EQUINOX, I'm sorry. But Mercury will be, again, the baggage of Uranus, Mercury in opposition here to Uranus, getting into, now Mercury is officially in the lab and doing the work and performing experiments and connecting dots. And again, we'll have to let go of some baggage at this point if we really want to actually connect dots that we've never connected before. Preconceived ideas, values, traditions, anything involving social ambition to gain more resources is going to have to be let go of in order to step into this non-material existence and to put these dots together. I just can't say it any other way. And it will be really supported with where the moon and the Neptune come together, because that innocent hope and that tactile sensation of trust and hope is going to be so, like I said, it's going to be something that we will not, it'll be so much part of us that it'll almost be so easy to let go, right? And to allow our minds to go in and do the very deep work in Scorpio. At the same time, the sun was in a trine to Neptune. Now this degree, I'm going to go back a day because this is important, because now we're going to start seeing people really push back, right? This degree of Scorpio that is going to trine Neptune, the Sun, and Mercury, and Mars as we go through November, each of those are going to hit this point where it represents a soldier obeying his conscience, pushes back against an authoritarian rule, right? We're going to see that happen. And it's going to happen over and over. And by the time it's going to be Mars, it's going to be the military and the and law enforcement, right? Those who realize that it's wrong are going to, and it's going to be supported by a very, very deep knowing that this is part of where we're going, right? And the moon meeting Neptune at this point later, right? So the sun does that, and then the next day the moon comes and meets Neptune, and this will become very clear to us in our soul, right? In our soul and in our subconscious. It'll be inseparable from our own experience, and we'll know that we can, we can obey our own conscience, right? That we can push back against, not even push back, it's about resisting and disobeying orders, right? Because you see now the truth of the situation and how important it is to participate in a system that is about cooperation and communion and not about control and power, because both of those things exist in Scorpio. So as we go through November at that point, because we're getting to the full moon now and the eclipse, right? So let's see here. Mars is gonna come into an opposition with Uranus while the moon is meeting Uranus, basically. So again, we will have a very, very strong emotional connection to the baggage that we have to let go of, and it'll be very emotional. It could be very erratic and irrational, right? Very, very erratic emotions, very unsettled emotions, very disruptive emotions about it. But we have Mars that is just charging into the darkness and charging into the unknown territory. And so in some ways, as much as there may be kind of like almost a nostalgia here with what we have collected, because this is going to be that last point now that Mars is the last. Look, I mean, there's nothing left over here, and there won't be for a long time, right? So now that Mars passes this point of Scorpio, it's going to be that last stand. So at this point, it's the last push, right? With our action and our warrior nature to really let go of the baggage. And it'll be difficult. Like I said, there'll be some nostalgia about it. We're going to want that whole social ambition thing and collecting of resources and finding and holding on to the baggage because of it. I mean, the moon is comfortable in Taurus. It's exalted there. So this is going to be our last stand before we have the eclipse, which is going to happen right after that. As you're going to see, the eclipse, full moon lunar eclipse. It's going to be at the last degrees of Taurus, right? So now we're in Pleiadian territory with the moon and the sun opposite the Pleiades. So this is a Pleiadian eclipse. Now let me say here, just briefly, this degree of Scorpio is in fact the solar return for Joe Biden in his 12th house. And on a solar eclipse, on a full moon lunar eclipse, this is a big entry and exit point for the occult ritual, right? These are exit points and enter points. These are sacrifices and births on full moon lunar eclipses. And to have it be, I'm just saying, I'm not forecasting necessarily, although I wouldn't be surprised. I'm just giving you information right now that this full moon lunar eclipse, when the elite come to the full moon, this is when they have exits and they have entries. And this is Joe Biden's solar return in his 12th house, right? The house of endings, the house of karmic, the unfinished business, right? This, especially the sun in the 12th house in the natal chart, unfinished business. Your whole life is lived in the realm of clearing up old karma and getting to clearing up unfinished karmic business. Okay. And the full moon lunar eclipse at this point. And the fact that this degree is with Algol, right? Beheadings of the Gorgon, right? That is Algol. That is the head of the Gorgon, Medusa. They love to behead, right? That is a big part of the way that they do things, is to take the head off. And the fact that it's eclipsed, right? That means it's going to reverberate out for months. So just keep that in mind, that this eclipse is a big deal. And this is a big time for major ritual activity. And it's very connected to Joe Biden's chart, okay? His solar return in his 12th house, and Algol, and as terms of the fixed star, the head of Medusa. And what happened to the head of Medusa? Off with her head, right? Off with her head. So just keep that in mind. Also, too, because it's so close to the lunar axis, which is why, or the nodal axis of the moon, which is why it's an eclipse, right? Which will be a full moon lunar eclipse on the 19th. So let's see here. And at the same time, Venus, sorry, I'm going to go back here real quick. At the same time, look at that. Venus will be in a trine to Uranus, right? Now in Capricorn. And this position is about really seeing beyond the life and death. That particular degree of Capricorn is a fire worshiper, is meditating beyond the concept of life and death, seeing the beyond life and death, because fire consumes while it creates, right? It consumes while it creates heat. It consumes fuel while it creates heat, okay? There's something that you get that full experience in that one very natural but very powerful chemical reaction that fire represents. It's a release of heat. That's what fire is a release of energy in a chemical reaction. And so the catalyzing effect is the two aspects of life and death in one singular moment, meditating on that to see that the bigger picture of that, Venus, our values, our traditions, what we love, who we love, in a trine to Uranus, the baggage. Boy. Is going to be very interesting, to say the least, when that full moon lunar eclipse comes. And they're going to go, whatever they're doing, they're going to do it. So just keep that in mind too. And that's the 19th, the 20th. We have Mercury in Scorpio, squaring Jupiter, right? the X-ray photograph, Mercury seeing into the structural underbelly of things with our own mind, in a square to, oh boy, because Jupiter is at this point now going direct. That's just like, here, let me expand on your ability to, and give you the resources to really teach from a place of very deep wisdom, because you have moved past the passion. Because that's Leo, right, is the passion. Once you move that and you see the full picture of the collective, you can teach about the nature of the connection to everything, right? Which means you have to leave. It's not that you leave the passion behind, but it's released into the opening of your awareness and your awakening. And Jupiter's really going to expand on that and support it. But at the same time, as you see into the dark and deep underbelly of things, the structure, the X-ray, seeing into the structural foundation of reality and the truth. Oof, it's gonna be really difficult not to like get caught up in the feeling of that. And so that's something to keep in mind too. After this full moon lunar eclipse, it's going to be very, very, very powerful. And then we have, of course, the sun then comes, it's crossing the galactic center. It's going to come into Sagittarius. That means it is now opposite of Alcyon, right? So we're still in Pleiadian territory in terms of the sun. This is a portal that opens, right? This is a very powerful time. And then the sun will meet K2 as well. And so then we get another connection to where we've been, our soul's karmic past, what we're releasing, what is the tail of the dragon, what's providing the momentum forward. And then also too, Mercury is at the galactic center. So as we move into the week of Thanksgiving, that's going to be like a big part of this, that they both move into Sagittarius and meet the South Node. So again, we come into this connection of where we've been and the catalyzing reaction of Sagittarius, and finding our sustainment, and also our minds looking at the big picture, which is not an easy place for Mercury. It's in its detriment in Sagittarius. It doesn't want to look at big picture. It doesn't want to synthesize material. Mercury just wants to engage with knowledge, not come to understanding necessarily. So again, we're going to reconnect to where we've been in terms of the higher mind, our collective beliefs, what we have created energetically with the power of our cooperation and communion, and where we've been. It's going to be a real eye-opener at this point. Let's see here. Another Cazimi, right? Because Mars, this is Thanksgiving on this day, the 26th. And the 27th, we're going to have a Cazimi with Mercury and the Sun are going to conjunct in Sagittarius, and there's going to be, a yearning for something, that's for sure, and a very bright and very brilliant awareness of the big picture, right? A very bright and very strong awareness of the big picture. Now, what we're going to find here, again, is that after this is where Mars comes into that trine with Neptune, and I just talked about it. So this will be, again, that last stand where, with bravery and courage and that action to move outward, we're going to find, obeying their conscience, disobeying orders, and being completely supported by a very deep, very expansive, very full knowing of where we're going, right? So again, this is going to be that last point. Nothing's going to come around necessarily to trine that in that position until anything comes back around to Scorpio. So the moon will come back around to that point. But that is going to be the big push, right? The big push that's going to be the final push in a lot of ways. And so then we come in, and the sun, now we're going to start coming into trines with Chiron, right? The sun and Mercury are both going to come into trines with Chiron before we move into December. And this is really, and this is in conjunction with Antares, the heart of the Scorpion, right? Can we keep our attention focused? Can we see the big picture within ourselves? Or are we going to get pulled off again by keeping our balance, right? We're going to be, constantly pulled into the divisive narrative of somebody's a victim, somebody needs to be saved, right? We need to keep our focus on the big picture and allow our vision to relax enough to have our full periphery. And if we can do that, it's really going to be supporting these two aspects of the sun and Mercury together, who are traveling together right now, meeting our Antares, right? The heart of the Scorpion, right? The sting of the Scorpion, the sting of what it means to bring these aspects together, the sting of the truth, of the deep truth. It's in some ways it can serve to focus us, but with Chiron involved, this is where we get into potential trouble of getting pulled off. Now, you see what I'm talking about here is that it just gets more intense and more intense. And every time that there seems to be an opportunity to really stand in our power and to really utilize the power of our connection to each other, there will be then another counterbalance that is going to challenge us to stay there, right? This is really going to be, this season is really going to be this is why they're pushing things so hard, because they know during this time it's make or break in a lot of ways, because they see everything is starting to turn on. And of course, this is when Venus is going to meet Pluto, right? We see that here throughout December, the early December, meet Pluto. And this is where we're going to have our next new moon, which is going to be, let's see here, I believe it's the 4th. And this is a total solar eclipse. And guess where this path of totality is? You're not even going to believe this. It's Antarctica. The path of totality for this solar eclipse that is at a degree of Sagittarius that has to do with retribution, by the way, right? This degree of the total solar eclipse, 12 to 13 degrees Sagittarius, a widow standing at an open grave, right? It is a widow's past brought to light. Sorry, a widow's past brought to light. My God, it is the idea that even when you come into a new cycle, whatever still was unresolved from the last cycle will be brought into the new cycle, and it's brought to light. I can't even tell you how they know what's coming, right? This is all staged already in terms of these massive cycles. This path of totality for the eclipse is over Antarctica, with a solar eclipse in Sagittarius that has everything to do with the past being brought to light. Oh my God. Wow. So intense. And it's in equinox to Uranus, still retrograde in Taurus, right? And in conjunction with Antares, the heart of the Scorpion, right? There's just so much that's going to come out. And there's just so much that's going to be brought to light. And it's just, everything is so... The potential for disruption here is incredible. Now, we know with solar eclipses, these, again, are not the greatest. It's because the moon is going to block the light of the sun. And so the darkness, the shadow, what is hidden under the surface is blocking the full revelation. But the fact that the path of totality is going over Antarctica, what is to come from this moment is certainly going to be an exposure of what is going on down there over the coming months, okay? And it's going to be brought into activation with this eclipse, and they know it, right? They absolutely know. And so everything they can do to keep, to keep it under wraps or whatever is certainly going to be on their, on their itinerary, on their agenda, okay? So, and there's nothing that can stop these cycles are not within their control, right? They're not within their control. The movement of the cosmos is not something they can control. And when these, there's a lot of seismic activity that's connected to these eclipses as well. So, I mean, there you go. Something to consider as well. Let's see here. We're getting down to the end, guys. You are so awesome. And I know that this is a lot of information. So go back and listen to it, right? Take some notes. Realize that over the course of the next couple of months, these things are going to come into a much more narrow focus energetically that we can all kind of work with together. Mercury is going to square Neptune, and the sun's going to square Neptune, right? All of those things are going to start happening. And again, where we think we're going. This is where Venus comes into a conjunction in early December. Venus comes into a conjunction with Pluto right after the sun or the moon meets Pluto. So you see here as we're going through, it's going to come and meet Pluto, Venus and Pluto coming together. So the, this degree that is now, things are just, things that are normally hidden, things that are normally occulted, they are not only going to be destroyed, but we're going to be we're going to be seeing the value of them being not only destroyed, but brought up to the surface to be destroyed. The value of it, the palpability, right? The fact that it's going to be so directly connected to our material world with Venus is really, really strong. And we have Mercury at the galactic center now, right? Activating our galactic origin, something so much bigger than what's happening on this planet, okay? Let's see what else is happening here. Let's just finish this up because this is getting, you can see that Mars is coming to the end of Scorpio, which is really denoting some sort of release, pressure release valve. The moon is already past Neptune again. As we see here, Mercury is going to come into Capricorn on the 14th. We're looking at Venus is just past Pluto, is going to be stationing retrograde here. The moon at this point is, on the 15th has already met Uranus at that moment. Now Mars is in Sagittarius. Mercury is in Capricorn, right? Our minds and our knowledge are really focused on, getting down to business, right? And let's see here, the 17th. Mars is going to meet K2, of course. And then here's our full moon. Here's our full moon at the galactic center. The sun will be at the galactic center. The moon will be at the end of Gemini, right? And we're, again, letting go of something in order to be released. And the sun at the galactic center is so showing us exactly what is working and what has worked for eons, right? Coming through not only our galaxy, but it's going to come right through our sun and show within us what it's time to release in order for us to be free, right? Bankruptcy has this negative connotation, but what it really does, it's an agreement at a social level that when the debt of a situation is too much, it's wiping it away. So there's going to be a wiping away here with this full moon that we will each be responsible for acknowledging within ourselves and letting go of based on this very potent full moon right before the solstice. So now we see here that Venus is retrograde right at Pluto, the Pluto return point within a degree basically. And then the 20th. And then we come to our solstice point. And here we are. Which is another yod, right? Between Jupiter, the sun, and a moon at the very last degrees of Cancer in an opposition to Pluto. So again, there will be, by the time we get to the solstice, it'll be really important that on an emotional and intuitive level that we really are stabilized to the core of who we are and finding what really does protect us, what really does encompass us and our vulnerability, so that in the face of these massive changes, because that means that Venus is going to come back over and meet Pluto again. So, and then we come into the next season, guys. And so there'll be plenty of opportunity to go over all of this on a weekly and daily basis. But I really felt like it was important to show you the general theme here and what to expect and how to utilize this tool to be able to anticipate not necessarily what you're going to do about yourself, although that is useful, right? But also to anticipate what others could be doing and what it means to them and how they use this tool, okay? It's really important that if you are trying to, establish some sort of push towards freedom and release from control, that if you understand the tools that they use in order to keep and act in control, then that gives you an edge, that gives you a leg up. It's an infiltration into their own process. And with astrology, you really see their timeline and how they're going to utilize it. So, and also you see how the cosmos is all organized, and the map of it in space and time that allows not just for them to harness it, but allows us to do it too. So, and not to make it divisive about us and them, because, good and bad, it really is relative. The only thing is truth. And this is truth, right? Because what's true is these cycles, right? They're measurable, they're observable. There's not anybody on this planet that can stop these cycles, right? And so that is truth. And when we recognize that as truth, then we can see things for what they really are, okay? And that is really important. That's really important. It's essential, right? And so there is solstice to equinox, my friends. I'm going to leave it here. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you got something out of this. I went through it as quickly and as succinctly as I can do it, right? Instead of just giving you sound bites to tell you what's going to happen, I'm giving you the tools to understand how to read it for yourself, right? And to show you the timeline and what these things really mean. So if you're interested in a reading to see how this is all going to play out in your natal chart, the areas of your life that it's going to impact, you can book a reading through catalystenergies.net. That's in the description box below. I'm running a flash sale for a bundle with 30 minutes of Reiki plus the new moon for October, like looking at that particular cycle with your chart. So $77 for the bundle. You can book through Catalyst Energies, or you can just email me. That's in the description box below. Follow Catalyst on Facebook or Telegram if you're into the social media. And if you're not into social media, but you still want to be updated when I offer things like this, you can go to my website and there's a splash page and you just can get on my mailing list. And that will allow you to stay in touch when I make offers for sales or discounts or any new service or anything like that will come through the email. So that way, if you're not into social media, you can still know what I'm up to and know when I'm offering sales or exclusives in that way. So, and if you don't have access to, for whatever reason, the splash page isn't coming up, you can email me and I'll put you on the email list. And I don't spam. I really don't. It's really just when I'm making new offerings or sales or exclusives. I don't send out reports through the email. I save that exclusively for these video platforms. So thanks, guys, for hanging with me. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm very interested in your feedback, and we will talk soon. Bye.